True innovation changes the way we live. Hi, I'm Cris, Valerio. Length, width, depth. These are the three dimensions of space that we live in. They're so natural, we don't even really think about them. When it comes to certain human activities, though, we've been limited by our tools. For instance, watching a movie on a screen or designing a product for a machine. These only happen in two dimensions. Until now, 3D technologies are transforming industries from entertainment to manufacturing. The world is not flat, and the innovators behind 3D, from Hollywood movie moguls to small business owners, are on a mission to take us into that third dimension.
3D is a game changer for almost all forms of entertainment.
It's that extreme leap.
It felt like an all or nothing bet.
The year is 1952. With the movie Buona Devil, Hollywood plunges into the world of 3D.
The old 3D was a gimmick, and it was actually a cheap gimmick.
It's the unforgettable African adventure story that made screen history.
Fast forward to today.
We are simply at the top of a waterfall.
DreamWorks Animation Chief Executive Jeffrey Katzenberg is a 3D evangelist.
Over the next decade, virtually everything that we view in any kind of video format is going to transition to 3D, because it is naturally how we do see things.
This is the Polar Express.
Katzenberg got on the 3D train in 2004 after watching the movie Polar Express.
The way in which it sort of immersed me into the story and the storytelling, was just incredibly compelling. And I literally left there, picked up the phone, called the team here at DreamWorks, and I said, this is our future.
DreamWorks Monsters vs. Aliens in true 3D.
From now on, Katzenberg plans to make every DreamWorks movie in 3D. And he's not alone. All over Hollywood, filmmakers are using breakthroughs in 3D technology to make movies sing.
When I see what it does to an audience, that's why I got in the business in the first place. It was to make people excited, to make them laugh, make them cry, scare them to death, take them somewhere they've never been before.
Sandy Climan is another Hollywood veteran hooked on 3D. Once an agent to stars like Robert De Niro, Kevin Costner, and Robert Redford, Climan is now chief executive of 3Reality. The company develops camera gear, hardware, and software for 3D movie making and television production.
Once you see 3D, you don't want to go back to 2D.
In the 50s, 3D films were made by lashing two cameras together. The technique is known as stereoscopic 3D.
Stereoscopic 3D is an illusion. It's an amazing illusion, but you're still looking at a flat movie screen. And what it is we're presenting two images, one for your left eye, one for your right eye, just like you normally see. And you fuse this together in your brain, and it creates this illusion of depth.
Until recently, 3D was imprecise because the two projectors often fell out of alignment. The images would jump or vary, giving people headaches and nausea.
What's changed it is the ability digitally to create images that are perfect. The tools to create in 3D are so precise today that the quality of what they're able to do is really a reinvention. I mean, it's a little bit like comparing the iPhone with an old, rotary phone.
What hasn't changed, though, is the fact that you still need glasses to see it.
What's projected out of the projector as the left eye image is only seen by your left eye, and what's projected as the right eye image is only seen by your right eye. That's why you have to wear glasses when you watch a 3D movie, is because of the filtering that's going on.
Still, the Hollywood 3D camp thinks it's revolutionary enough for the public to pay an extra $3 to $5 a movie.
You look at 2009, which is really sort of the year that 3D has come into its own, and virtually every opportunity that the consumer has had to trade up to a 3D or to a 3D IMAX experience, they have done so in a very, very big way around the world.
Combine that with plummeting costs as the technology develops and the alien movie business starts looking up.
Wow.
Our movies cost about $150 million a year. We make 3 of them a year here at DreamWorks Animation.
DreamWorks Pictures presents.
Excuse me, I'm looking for the ugly stepsister.
And they are 3 of probably the 12 or 15 most expensive movies made in the world in that year. For us, 3D is about a 10% incremental cost, so it takes it to about $165 million. But that cost has already started to go down, and for our movies next year, in 2010, that cost will probably be down in the 7 to 8% from 10%.
So are you guys, buying better chips, or is it human capital that's becoming cheaper?
Certainly, the computing capability and software is continuing to evolve, and frankly, the ability of our filmmakers themselves.
Convinced that 3D is the future of Hollywood, DreamWorks began its transformation into a 3D-only studio. Easier said than done. Jim Maynard, head of production development, and Phil Captain 3D McNally, the studio's 3D supervisor, had to retrain hundreds of production and editing staff.
First thing we have to do is train them to stop thinking in 2D. The world around us is 3D, and we go to great lengths in the movie business of using depth of field and various sorts of camera techniques to create a sense of depth. But when you have a 3D movie, you don't need to do that.
Cinematography is really the art of 3D to 2D conversion, but it's become so ingrained that those are the skills that, literally like depth of field or lens choice or composition. We've kind of forgotten that that's actually what we're doing.
Adjustment that your eyes go through.
The duo took us behind the scenes at DreamWorks for a 2D tour of 3D movie making.
When I put my glasses on, we look at this in a 3D. This is a 3D capable television. We can actually expand the depth to be way out in front of the screen, out here. And from your normal viewing position back on the sofa over here somewhere, the 3D could be out this far or even further. And of course, expanding the depth behind the screen is important as well. And actually by pushing the depth behind, it's as if this has become a window that you're looking out through that window onto the world, which is expanding out beyond the screen.
It's a whole new world for the viewer and for the filmmakers.
The initial barriers were absolutely technological. Until very recently, we didn't have the ability to separate those eyes and get a great stable image.
That's where 3reality comes in.
The one-word answer as to why 3D is now coming back is digital.
Steve Schklair is a 3D pioneer. Before teaming up with Climan at 3reality, he spent 10 years working on technology that would bring costs down.
3D was very complex to shoot in film because it was very hard to align two images. If you have a left and right camera, but they're out of alignment vertically, well, your eyes, when you're watching the movie, one has to tilt up and one has to tilt down to watch that movie, which you can do for a little while. So aligning images is critical. Somewhere during the transition phase, we'd go do a 3D shoot. We'd spend 2 days prepping cameras to make sure everything was in perfect alignment. You can't do a show on a reasonable budget if you're spending 4 days prepping for a one-day shoot. So we had to develop tools that would do this automatically.
3reality's camera systems ensure the cameras are 95% aligned before a single shot is recorded.
So instead of spending 4 hours trying to manually align something, in a fraction of a second, the cameras will go and align themselves.
Post-production technology takes care of the rest.
We've developed controls and, more importantly, proprietary software that takes from image capture, image processing through the standard broadcast or cinematic processes right to image delivery to either a television or a theater.
Those advances allow 3D shooting on a schedule that was just not possible a few short years ago.
Our goal is that you be able to shoot 3D at a 2D budget.
Solving all the technical and financial challenges opens up a whole new set of creative possibilities.
In the hands of the right director, depth can be used to help tell the story.
3reality's U2 3D was one of the first live-action movies to do that.
Every transition was handled by handing off depth or placed at a dramatic moment in an appropriate place to tell the story better.
Ray Hannison is a stereographer, or a depth artist.
When Bono sings the high note in Miss Sarajevo, we bring him out into the audience and then bring him back. When Edge turns his head and Bono appears, we have them make eye contact. And when edge disappears, mono floats back to the appropriate depth. So we now have an art form we call depth balancing or stereoscopic depth balancing, where we can constantly move things through space for dramatic purpose as well. And this is kind of a whole new ball game for 3D.
In another 3reality edit room, Rob Albano is tweaking 3D titles.
Trying to check for the most comfortable placement of the text, so it's not too extreme coming out at you, and it's not too far back where you start losing depth.
For example, circular polarized glasses.
DreamWorks has developed its own proprietary software to manipulate depth.
In real life, you never have any hard transitions. If you're reading the book, close up and you look out the window, there's an adjustment that your eyes go through. And so in a 3D movie across a hard cut, we want to be able to adjust from one shot to the next, whether it's a close-up or a wide shot. Eric's able to change the curves and change the 3D as we're going.
But there's still one challenge left to overcome.
If the technology is so good that you forget the technology is there, then you've succeeded. And we're not quite there yet. The glasses are still in the way. There's a few things, but we're getting there.
One of the great things that will happen that will accelerate all of this is when we get to something called auto stereo, which is actually being able to see 3D without glasses. So when that happens, the floodgates open.
Katzenberg predicts auto stereo will be mainstream within the decade. The last piece of the puzzle of 3D is distribution. A true transition means retrofitting thousands of movie theaters, plus selling millions of 3D-enabled televisions. Making 3D movies is great, but where do we watch them? There are fewer than 2,000 theaters in the U.S., like this one, equipped to show 3D movies. The numbers are growing fast, though. They doubled in the past year, and just this fall, JP Morgan agreed to finance the upgrading of thousands of theaters here in the U.S. for 3D by mid-2010. Jeffrey Katzenberg says the cinema chains are starting to see the light.
We're all in this together, and so, we've tried over the last 18 months to lend our support in any way possible to the exhibitors, to the bankers, to the financiers. We've hosted some of the bankers here. We've been willing to show pieces of our up-and-coming slate of films in order to get people excited about this.
We have dragons.
To make this kind of a capital investment in such a difficult economy takes a lot of courage and foresight. You are looking over the horizon. You do have to believe that what is coming is going to be transformational. It's a big bet. And people are insecure about doing that.
The real cost is in film to digital. Digital to digital 3D is a very small move economically. So because the audience has demonstrated the economic benefits of 3D, the financing is coming into place to actually allow a greater theater conversion around the world.
Theaters are one thing, but even movie moguls say televisions are the key to the transition.
Until you have a TV set, a TV monitor that is 3D capable, in it, until those things are massively distributed and people have adapted them. And so, that will take, as I say, quite a long time before it becomes mass market. But we're on our way. And you'll see in next year, beginning in 2010, several million TV sets, and that will escalate to, in 2011, I think it's 10 to 20 million. And suddenly, it's going to become a part of everyday life for us.
The move to the home is really the big change. And whether that's through home video, or that is live broadcast, or it's just the conversion of the broadcast industry to 3D, I think we're going to see sporting events lead the way.
Sports, another field in which 3reality is a major player.
We are having the solution for live broadcast systems. We have zoom lenses. So with our lenses you can zoom full range, and our hardware and our software is making sure that the 3D is always correct, the cameras are always aligned, and both lenses are tracking exactly the same.
Real time?
In real time.
In 2D you have As an example, in the NFL shoot, you had 25 2D cameras, and we used 10 3D cameras. At the end of the day, with 2D cameras, you're cutting back and forth to create a sense of motion. And it's as if they are a participant in the game as opposed to a spectator to the game.
Climan expects that in the next cycle of new television purchases, more and more will have 3D or stereo capability.
You're going to be paying for a new TV at the same price you would have paid for a non-3D TV. And that's what's going to make the difference. The goal is to get people to buy new TVs, not to charge them an excessive premium.
Someday you'll be shooting interviews like this in stereo because there's enough viewers at home with stereo TVs and they don't want flat pictures anymore, just like they don't want to watch black and white anymore.
What you see, that's 3D output. But the flip side of 3D is the input, where the TV sees the viewer in 3D, which allows a person to control the TV with body motions. That's where a Silicon Valley startup called Canesta is making waves.
We make a little sensor that enables everyday devices with the ability to see. What this means is that they now have an optical sensing technology which enables them to locate objects and users in three-dimensional space so that they can sense things in their nearby surroundings. So you can imagine televisions that can watch their users and enable users to control the system simply by using gestures.
Canesta CEO Jim Spare is convinced that his little chip is on the brink of big things.
Anyone that has more than one remote sitting on their table knows that the television viewing experience is ripe for innovation. And when we look at the existing way that we control the television viewing experience, remote control is not the optimal way.
Canesta is partnering with television maker Hitachi to enable TVs to react to viewer gestures. But Canesta sees a bigger market for 3D input. The company just raised $16 million from Taiwan's Quanta Computer, the largest laptop maker in the world, and SMSC, another chip maker. It doesn't stop there, though. Another Canesta investor, Honda.
It can display a view as if you were on the sidewalk, watching yourself back into that parallel parking space by giving you a 3D image of everything that's behind or beside the car.
Auto aficionados have discovered new 3D technology that's changing the rules of the road. One antique car collector showed us how 3D innovation made it into his garage.
Yeah, it was right out here.
Talk show host Jay Leno is a die-hard car collector. For 20 years, he's been restoring antique autos in this shop in Burbank. Some are as old as 1906.
Well, this car here is a Duesenberg Model J. It's a very rare car. There aren't many of them. It scans it on the scanner. That's what it does.
Last year, he bought a 3D scanner, which can capture the dimensions of any object. Then he uses his 3D printer to create those objects.
We needed a couple of these to hold the headlights. Now, you're not going to find any. There aren't any other cars that are similar. This bolts to the fender. It's a stress member. It's an important part of the car. So we realized using the 3D printer, we could design it on the computer, make it in plastic, fit it, see that it worked, and then go make it in metal.
Leno says 3D scanners and printers are bringing cars back from the dead. They let him reproduce parts that he might not have been able to find.
In the old days, you'd have to go to a pattern maker. He would have to make a pattern based on the information you gave him. It gets very expensive, and you get it back. If it doesn't fit, well, you've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money, and he built it to your specifications, so it's your fault.
His new toys are making many of his old ones obsolete.
This is a perfect example of the way it used to be. You start with a huge block of metal, and you just keep whittling away and whittling away. And this is all metal in all these cans until you make the part that you need. That's sort of the old school way to do it.
With a 3D scanner, anyone can capture the exact dimensions of a part.
You see these red lights, these bands going across here. They're actually laser light contours, and they're measuring about 50,000 points a second on the surface of that. Within a few minutes, we'll have 1 million points measuring exactly what the shape of that object is.
And with a 3D printer, you can literally print out a prototype.
This is a part off a steam car. This is called a feed water heater. This was originally made of aluminum. And after the car is in 1907, and after over 100 years of use, it was just falling apart. Now this would have been $6,000 to send to a pattern maker to do. And we had it made, made in aluminum, the whole deal, for $200. This is a brand new part for a 1907 car that does not exist anymore. There are no new parts anywhere. Remember the movie Wall Street where they're talking on these kind of cell phones? Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, all right, I'll call. I got my portable phone right here. And that, now you laugh at that. I mean, that's where it's going.
Mark Knighton is the CEO of Next Engine, which makes 3D scanners. His company has brought the size of a machine down from a closet to a bread box, and the cost from upwards of $100,000 to $3,000.
You can see sort of the atoms that are there that we've produced. But behind those atoms, there are bits. There's software, 6 million lines of code that make the thing do what it does. There's a lot of patents in this technology, a lot of intellectual property that enables it being made.
This was a metal chain we put in and we scanned it. You'll see it's as thick and as loose or as tight as the original chain was. And you didn't make it in links and then have to put it together. It copies the chain exactly with all the gaps in between exactly as the original chain was.
And it's not just reproduction. Once you bring the scan into design software, you can manipulate the object however you want.
This is the headlight holder. And let's say when it was made, let's say over the years, oh, they kept cracking here because of stress of going up and down over bumps. Well, you could take this part and using the computer, design it to be much heavier and thicker in this area. So it would still be an original copy, you would just have a little more metal in there. So you can actually improve on things.
All around his shop, antique cars are getting a new lease on life with 3D printed parts.
You're not going to find one of these door handles. So you take it off, you scan it, and you make an exact copy, and nobody can tell the difference. People keep saying, well, give me another example of what you made. Well, you can make whatever you want. It makes an exact copy of whatever you want. That's the fascinating thing about it. And people go, well, how about this? Yes, yes, it will do that.
Of course, 3D scanners and printers are not just for cars. They are revolutionizing manufacturing by changing supply chain relationships and speeding time to market.
It allows us to make something, feel it, and say, you know, that doesn't feel right, and carve it a little bit, scan it, put it back into the printer, print it again, and refine it. But to do that all within hours and days instead of months. And that changes the entire characteristic of product development, and it allows us to make much higher quality products, but to make them with less capital cost and in less time.
3D printing companies may have begun by speeding up the design process, but now they're moving beyond just prototyping. From Hollywood to the heartland, Jay Leno's 3D printer is made by Minnesota-based Stratasys. Founder Scott Crump came up with the idea in his spare time.
When my daughter and I were playing, I built up a toy froggy. I built up layers of plastic, which became the fundamentals of our technology. When I basically burnt up all the pots and pans, I was told that maybe it'd be better to go out in the garage, so that put Stratasys as a true garage startup.
When he'd spent more than $10,000 tinkering with the idea, his wife told him to quit it or start a company. So he did.
3D printing is essentially outputting a physical geometry from your computer design. So it has an analogy to doing a drawing and then printing out the drawing, or doing a report and then from the computer printing that out on a 2D printer. If you continue to print out that same report, eventually you create a three-dimensional stacking, and that is a three-dimensional representation of the design.
Over the last few years, Stratasys has cut the price of a printer from $200,000 to just $15,000. So has its Boston-based competitor, Z Corporation.
The big innovation is the time and the cost. Previously, people would reserve making a model or a prototype for the end of the design process because it would take 2 weeks and it would cost $10,000. So they couldn't afford to do it all the time. If you can find the mistakes early in day one, they really don't cost you anything. If you find the mistake at 3 months into the design process, or if you're actually into production, those get really expensive to try to fix.
And then there's the bonus of being able to truly showcase ideas.
Now people can make a model just to go to a meeting. It's powerful to be able to show the model, to say, yes, that's what we want. It's just as powerful when it's not what they want. Throw it away, do some work, and create another one.
The Timberland Boot Company in New Hampshire says its 3D printer has literally revolutionized the company's product cycle.
Before we had 3D printing, it could be a lengthy process. We'd make a request for a physical sample from one of our factories, or have our model makers in-house here at headquarters build an outsole model for us, for example, and that could take a week or 2 weeks. Now we can produce a 3D print of an outsole model pretty quickly, in a matter of hours.
That's a competitive advantage in the fast-moving world of footwear.
Trends change pretty quickly, so if we can capture a design idea and get that into manufacturing sooner, then we're going to produce product that are more with the current trends.
In the future, you may be able to make toys or door handles or even your own hiking boots on a 3D printer in your home office.
If you remember on Star Trek, they used to have the replicator. Very similar to that, very easy, fast output, and right on the spot you get the part.
With a device like this, you could make anything, and you can make one of everything.
Movies, antique cars, hiking boots, just a few examples of the 3D transformation taking place. In the next few years, many expect augmented reality, or the combining of virtual and physical worlds, to set the new standard for interactivity. That brings digital data into the third dimension with us. One thing's for sure, the innovators behind 3D are revolutionizing the way our brains process spatial information, changing the way we live. I'm Cris Valerio. Thanks for watching.